Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we have something very interesting to say the least. As you can see, you might recognize this figure, but if not, this is the Spider Rex. This is a very interesting web-chomping Spider Rex that has been showing up at Walmart. It's also, I believe, on Amazon, potentially. I know it's definitely at Walmart. But it's something that was made by Hasbro, and it's a very interesting Tyrannosaurus. Obviously, nothing that we would take as scientifically accurate. This is meant to be, I guess, some sort of a strange Spider-Man Tyrannosaurus Rex sort of thingamajigger. And considering it's a dinosaur, I was immediately intrigued, but the fact that this thing is like $45 for absolutely no reason, just a ridiculously high price, I did not want to pick it up. I kind of wanted it, but I didn't want to pay that much for it because that's just too much for me when it comes to something like this. When you can get like a Mattel Rex that's even bigger than this and more impressive than this for $10 to $15 cheaper. But this was actually very kindly sent to me by the man, the myth, the legend, Ultrazilla. He was super cool and had contacted me and asked me if I wanted it because he actually had purchased it, and I believe he had it up on his YouTube channel as well, and I guess he just didn't want it anymore, so he had contacted me and asked me if I wanted it, and I said absolutely. I offered to buy it from him, and he said no worries as far as that goes, and just sent it to me out of the kindness of his heart. So a huge thank you goes out to Ultrazilla for being insanely awesome and sending this over to me just as a gift, again, out of the kindness of his own heart. So thank you so much to him. And now we get the pleasure of taking a look at this crazy looking creature here on my channel as well. And again, as you can see, it obviously is a very interesting take on a Tyrannosaurus. And even though it is very obviously Spider-Man-ish, especially since we can see that right there, it has some decent detail to it. Like, it's nowhere near what I would consider a great figure, but the actual detailing on it is better than what I was expecting, and I would say probably better than what Hasbro did with the Jurassic World line. But looking at this figure, we can also tell that let's hope that Mattel keeps the Jurassic license forever and it never ends up back in the hands of Hasbro, because if this is a sign of what Hasbro would be giving us for the Jurassic World line if they ever acquired the rights again, that's definitely not something I'd like to dabble into. But regardless, again, we're going to go ahead and take a closer look at this Spider Rex right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt of our Spider Rex, again, as you can see, it does actually have some pretty decent looking detail to it. Definitely not bad as far as the skin texture goes. You can see we also have some decent looking detailing up here as well. You've got the nostrils sculpted out there. The eye socket has a very bright white in it that's really quite drowning out the detail. You've also got a black that runs up and over and under the eye and then leads up here toward the palate. And that's really about it as far as coloration here on the face, outside of the really bright reddish coloration, that classic Spider-Man red. You also have a very interesting web-like crest up here on the top of our Tyrannosaurus that has some okay looking detail and is painted with kind of like an off-white. We have an articulated jaw, which, as you can see, is going to make some noises. But on the inside of the mouth, we don't really have a tongue or anything. We've basically got like a little missile in here we can shoot out. The teeth are okay on the upper jaw, but they're all kind of bunched together, so they don't look that great. And the teeth on the lower jaw, there's only a tiny, tiny little area in the front of the mouth, so there's not really a whole lot going on as far as the teeth go either. As you start to move down a little further into the neck, you can see some skin texture, but it absolutely is muted compared to what you would expect to see. Like, the actual detailing is definitely muted in the neck. It's there, it's just not really that nice. As you continue to move along, you can see some more of the black designing here on the underside, and you can also see the arm sculpt looks okay. You've got some muscle definition there. You can also see the arms are held out really straight for some reason, and it looks very ugly. I'm not a big fan of the way that the arms are kind of positioned in such a stiff, lifeless manner, and also, of course, being a Tyrannosaur, those arms are way too long. But there is also no nail paint, and then we don't have nail paint for the feet either, so that seems to be something everybody likes to do, is jip us on nail paint. You can see some more nice looking texturing though to the skin here in the stomach region. Definitely looks really quite nice as far as the texturing goes, and I feel like with a nice repaint, this thing could look kind of okay, or at least better than it does now. You can again see that design up here with the spider and that blackish type of a coloration. As we move back here, though, you can see kind of like the spinal column and stuff here running along the back. You can see a very abrupt transition to the blue. Same deal for the legs. The legs are now a very bright blue. There is some muscle definition in the legs and some pretty darn nice looking skin texture yet again. So Hasbro has done kind of a decent job in certain aspects, but the legs just like really thin and awkward looking overall, and very much so looks like a Spider-Man's legs rather than a Tyrannosaur's legs. But as we move down, you can see the kneecap, you can also see the calf muscle. Again, another very abrupt transition right there. To the red again for the feet. The feet look okay, nothing really to write home about. You've got kind of like some sort of like scoots, but not really running down the toes. Again, the nails are nicely sculpted. We do have a claw here on the back of the leg, but we've also got, again, the dew claw right there. And then as you move back up, you can again see that the details are a little muted right here as well. And as you lead out the length of the tail, we continue to see that style of, detailing where it's just not really that vibrant. It's just a little bit more muted than I would expect to see. You have like larger scales here running along the top of the tail, but no scale detail really on the figure as a whole looks particularly impressive. You do have a larger scaling here on the underside of the Rex. And looking at this thing, it almost looks like it could potentially be like a revamped version of the Jurassic World Hasbro T-Rex. It just kind of has that same look and feel. But then again, being a Hasbro figure, you would expect that, I guess. But you can again see that it looks pretty much the same over here as what we had seen on the previous side, except now we've got those classic Hasbro screw holes, and yes, those are really, really abundant throughout the entire figure. Again, giving us more reason to be happy that Mattel has the Jurassic license and not Hasbro, because I definitely don't miss all of those ugly screw holes. It still is, again, not the ugliest and worst thing I've ever seen in the world, but it absolutely is ridiculous, and for the price range of like $45, I feel like the price is a bit much for something like this. As far as playability goes, you have articulation in the upper and lower jaws. You can also tell we have noises, because it just seems to continuously do that. But we also have articulation in the arms. Not a whole lot of articulation, and it looks ridiculous. But we do have articulation in the arms, a little more on this side than we do on the other side. We also have articulation in the legs. Only forward, they cannot go back. And they can move together because, again, we have more noises. And no articulation in the tail at all. So as far as articulation goes, we've got the bare minimum. Let's go ahead and check out what some of the action features are. So we've got a Jurassic World T-Rex roar, or Jurassic Park T-Rex roar, with some Spider-Man noises. Very interesting. We've also got this button here. I don't know what it does. So clearly we get a T-Rex roar again, a Jurassic Park Rex roar. Interesting. And then we've also got a button back here, which I think maybe... Yep, that's what I thought. Shoots out the missile quite violently into everything that I have over here on the side, because I wasn't exactly prepared for that to happen. But again, you can hear it definitely has some interesting sound effects and a few different aspects as far as playability, which are kind of cool. But as a whole, I wouldn't say anything about the figure is all that impressive. But for a size, you are looking at about 16 3/4 inches, or around 42.5 centimeters. And then for a height, the highest point here would be this weird crest. You're looking at about 7 1/4 inches, or around 18.5 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Peppo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our Spider-Rex figure. And you can see that pretty much the only impressive aspect of this figure would really be the size. It does have a pretty good, pretty impressive size. It's not huge, but it's also not small, and I definitely think you can figure that much out here next to these figures. And then for another size comparison, we have the Spider-Rex next to a Mattel Extreme Damage T-Rex, and this should help to give you an idea of the fact that it's a fairly similar size to the Extreme Damage Rex, but the Extreme Damage Rex is a bit longer than our Spider-Rex. Still not too far off as far as the size. And then for one final comparison, we have a Mattel Raptor and Dilophosaurus here next to the Spider Rex. Again, just to give you one last idea of the size of this Rex and the fact that it still has a pretty decent size even if it isn't the best Rex in the world. So this Hasbro Spider Rex figure is definitely something. It's an interesting figure to say the least, and I definitely wouldn't say it's one of the best figures that I've ever seen, but I also wouldn't say it's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. But I think it's mostly because, you just have to have that certain market for this to be appealing. Like, kids would probably love it. I mean, that's obviously who they're aiming this at. And any Spider-Man collector would probably love it as well. But people like, the majority of the people like myself and, whoever visits my channel, who would normally be looking for more, at least slightly more realistic dinosaurs, may not enjoy this so much. But if you can go into this with the mindset of it's just kind of like a sort of like an off-the-wall, exaggerated, interesting take on a Spider-Man Tyrannosaurus Rex, then you might be able to appreciate it for what it is. I can say that although I'm not the biggest fan of it in the world, I don't hate it either, just because it's at least something different, something a little bit more unique, and something that I personally have never seen before. And when I initially had seen this at Walmart, it instantly drew my attention in, so obviously it's got some sort of a draw to it because, again, it's unique, and it's definitely the type of figure that if somebody sees, they're going to be like, what is that? So, I mean, it kind of has that unique conversation starter aspect to it. But as a whole, the actual execution of the figure isn't so great because, it's Hasbro. We never really get greatness from Hasbro when it comes to dinosaurs. I think the best thing that they had ever done would have been like the Jurassic Park 3 line and the Jurassic Park Dinosaurs line and stuff like that. But once Jurassic World came around, they just stopped trying, and obviously they still don't care much today because the actual sculpting and detailing as far as the fine detail of this figure isn't very good. It's really quite muted for the majority of the figure. It's not very vibrant and in no way impressive. I think the best area of detailing on the entire figure would be the stomach region, but outside of that, the detail again just doesn't really shine the way it should. The paint scheme obviously is interesting. It's very Spider-Man-like, and that's what it's meant to be, so I guess they achieved that fairly well. It doesn't look terrible, but it doesn't look great. As far as being the coloration of a real dinosaur, it doesn't look good at all. But as far as being the coloration of a Spider Rex, it definitely looks alright. The really big downside for this one, of course, are screw holes galore everywhere on the left side of the figure. It is just overloaded with screw holes, like terribly. The articulation, though, is pretty minimal. There's not much you can do with it as far as articulation goes. There's some kind of fun action features, which kids will definitely get a kick out of, but I wasn't really all that impressed with any of the action features of the figure. They're not bad, but they're not great either. So as a whole, definitely not worth the price, so I'm very happy that Ultrazilla was kind enough to send it to me because I don't think that I would have actually purchased it, at full price myself because I just don't think it's worth the price. But it is still a really cool, exaggerated version of a Spider-Man T-Rex that I will happily enter into my collection just because it's something different, something unique, and something I definitely did not have in my collection prior to this. So again, thank you so much to Ultrazilla. If you guys are interested in this, I will try to find a link to include in the description. Otherwise, head to your local Walmart and it should be there because I see it pretty much every time I go nowadays. And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.